A man in 1893 stood at a trade fair, buttons lining his coat. He had a better idea in his pocket, and it didn't work. The little metal device snagged, jammed, and fell apart in his hands. Nobody at the Chicago World's Fair bought it. Nobody even asked twice. And yet that broken object in Whitcomb Judson's palm was the zipper, or almost the zipper, which is the whole story. Here is what nobody explains about fasteners. Buttons are forgiving. A button can be slightly wrong and still hold a shirt closed. A zipper cannot be slightly wrong. It either works perfectly or fails completely. That tolerance problem would haunt the next 30 years of engineering. Judson's original device was called the clasp blocker. 2 chains of hooks, meant to interlock when a sliding tab pulled them together. The mechanism seized under light tension and opened under its own weight. Sailors testing early versions lost patience within one morning at sea. The Postal Service, approached in 1896, ordered 20 units and returned most of them. For a fastener to matter, it needed to close without thinking. A button requires 2 hands and attention. A working zipper requires 1 hand in half a second. That gap, that 1 hand, that half second, was worth a fortune. But closing, it took a Swedish-American engineer named Gideon Sundback. Sundback joined the company that had inherited Judson's patent around 1906. His first wife worked at the factory in Hoboken, New Jersey. She died in 1911, and the records suggest he buried himself in the problem. Within 2 years, he had redesigned the fastener from the teeth upward. The old hooks were replaced with tiny nested cups, scooped metal teeth. Each tooth had a small dimple on top and a nub on the bottom. Under the slider, nub locked into dimple under controlled pressure. The angle of interlocking was precise enough that vibration couldn't undo it. But hand tension still could, which was exactly right for a garment. Sundback filed his key patent in 1913, and the geometry was finally sound. A machine he also designed could stamp and attach teeth at speed. That machine could produce several feet of fastener per minute. The factory floor in Hoboken smelled of machine oil and warm brass. Workers fed cloth tape through guides while the teeth crimped into place one by one. For 3 years, almost nobody outside the factory cared. The civilian market looked at the zipper and thought, why fix what works? Buttons were cheap, familiar, and repairable with a needle and thread. A broken zipper in 1915 required a specialist, or simply a new garment. Then, the military placed an order, and everything shifted register. The United States Navy needed fasteners for flying suits and money belts during the war years. A button on a flying suit at altitude, with gloved hands, was a problem. A zipper was not a fashion statement. It was an engineering solution to cold and speed. Money belts with zippers were issued to soldiers to secure documents and currency. The military's volume order forced the factory to standardize tolerances for the first time. Before that order, each batch of zippers varied slightly. The slider fit differed run to run. The war made consistency mandatory, and consistency made the zipper trustworthy. After the war, the zippers came home, but not into clothing, not yet. The first civilian push was for tobacco pouches and rubber galoshes. A rubber boot with a zipper closure cost more than one with buckles. Advertisements from the early 1920s did not promise elegance. They promised you would not stand in a cold hallway fumbling with wet straps. Galoshes sold. The zipper earned its first domestic foothold through wet weather. Then a tailor in New York began fitting children's clothing with the mechanism. The argument was simple. A child could dress without a parent's help. Independence. That was the word used in the advertisement copy. For parents exhausted by morning routines, the zipper was not a fastener. It was 7 minutes return to their day. By the late 1920s, a few menswear designers in Paris began experimenting. Not for elegance, for provocation. The zipper was industrial. It looked machine-made. On a suit, it was a statement that clothing could be functional first. Elsa Schiaparelli used zippers as decorative elements, visible and intentional. Suddenly, The thing that had been hidden inside boots was placed on display. That shift, from concealed utility to visible design, changed what the zipper meant. Here is where the myth needs correcting, quietly and precisely. Most people believe the zipper replaced the button in men's trousers during the 1930s. The mechanism existed by then, but trouser makers resisted for nearly a decade more. The resistance was not technical. It was a modesty concern from the garment trade itself. Trade publications debated whether a front zipper was appropriate for men's dress trousers. The button fly, they argued, was a deliberate friction, a considered barrier. The zipper's speed was not always presented as an advantage in that context. Levi Strauss did not add zippers to their denim work trousers until 1954. That date lands later than most people guess by about 15 years. Now came the gear change nobody in the early factories had anticipated. Nylon, the post-war material that rewrote the cost of almost everything textile. Metal zippers were precise, but heavy, expensive, and prone to corrosion near salt water. A nylon coil zipper weighed almost nothing, cost a fraction, and bent without cracking. The YKK company in Japan, founded in 1934, had been refining metal zipper production. After the war, they pivoted into nylon and built machines to produce the coil at scale. YKK eventually manufactured its own brass, its own polyester tape, its own boxes. A single company controlling every input in a zipper was an almost invisible monopoly. Today, YKK produces roughly half of all zippers made on Earth. That number, half of all zippers, is difficult to hold in the mind properly. Every sleeping bag you have ever sealed, half of them, likely made by one company. Every jacket hung in a school corridor, the teeth probably came from the same machines. The unintended trade-off was this: the zipper democratized fastening, but concentrated its making. A button can be made by almost anyone, almost anywhere with basic tools. A precision zipper requires calibrated machinery, consistent alloy, and quality control infrastructure. When that supply chain snags, a port closure, a material shortage, coats pile up unfinished. The zipper made clothing faster to wear and slower to fix. A broken zipper on a good coat now often means the coat is retired, not repaired. Historians who study material culture note that the zipper quietly shifted our relationship with repair. The before world, when a button popped off and you simply sewed it back, receded. As a small integrity reminder, the precise dates and motivations in zipper history are sometimes disputed. Patent records, company archives, and oral histories do not always agree on the same moments. What the material evidence does confirm is the engineering sequence: tolerance, standardization, material shift. The zipper is not a story about one inventor's genius. It is a story about a mechanism that required every part of an industrial system to mature simultaneously. A working tooth, a consistent slider, a material that wouldn't corrode, a machine that could scale. Remove any one of those four things, and you are back to 1893, holding something that jams. What does the zipper quietly solve? That we have completely stopped noticing. Not just the coat. The assumption that a fastener should require no skill to operate. That is a designed expectation. And someone spent 40 years engineering it into existence. If this kind of hidden history is what you look for in everyday objects, stay close to this channel. Every object around you was someone's 40-year problem before it became your half-second habit.